Hi, my name is Eric Miller. Happy to be here, live here in the beautiful southeastern Ohio area. I'm here to talk a little bit about my story in recovery and my mental health struggles as well. And basically all the victories and some of the stumbles I've had in my life. But I'm just very grateful to be here as well, and also to be working in mental health as well and helping those who need these kinds of services, and to also reduce that stigma as well.
Well, thank you so much for coming out and joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely.
Can you start off by telling us a little bit about your childhood?
My childhood was pretty much you would, not the white picket fence, but it was very all-American kind of thing. My parents were teachers. I grew up in Appalachia, so I'm a child of Appalachia. Very proud of that. Comes with it a lot of stigma as well, but hardworking, very much blue-collar family. Where we lived was a town of about, I don't know, roughly 2,000 people. There was like 87 students in my graduating class. My parents both taught at my high school. I was involved in athletics all through, but I have a sister as well, but I always felt different in a lot of ways. Different in the aspect of, like, I saw the world differently. I was a very anxious kid and a very hyperactive kid. So, coming from a musical family, I was given a drum set at the age of 2 because instead of giving meds for hyperactivity, my parents being teachers, in 1977 they gave me a drum set. And it was probably one of the greatest gifts ever, because God ultimately gave me the gift of being able to play. I always was the kid that was searching for justification by people. Well, why do you like me so much? Or I was always that one that was, even though he was loved, I was always searching for it. Like, that just always longing for that kind of feeling. And I think there's a lot of people who can relate to that in the long term, especially those in recovery, even though they may not have had some super traumatic thing happen in their childhood. My trauma was, late in my teens when that happened. So.
Okay. So, when did you first start using alcohol? And then when did you get into using drugs?
First time I had a drink was when my dad told me to go get him a beer, and I forget how old I was, 10, 11.
Okay.
And I was being the ornery kid, shook it up, gave it to him, opens it up, got mad. He said, "Go get me another one." I understand. It was funny. But then I was like, and I remember that going, this is terrible. But I remember it was Miller High Life in a can. It just was.
Yep.
So I do remember that. First time I used any drugs, I was 17 and I smoked weed with some friends in a Jeep. And I wasn't like peer pressure. I was dealing with a girlfriend issue at the time, and I felt like, this might help. So it was always dealing with something. Obviously, there was the first red flag. I was stressed and anxious. Yeah.
And you said that you had some trauma in your teenage years as well?
Yeah, I had. Well, it was later in my teenage years. I was 18, and my mother, who was my hero, and she's the reason I have these tattoos. She got diagnosed with cancer, and in fact, I'm kind of believe when I was getting ready to start my freshman year at Ohio State, the summer of '93, excuse me, was at my orientation there. And she went off to do something, I forget, and I was doing my math entrance exam there. And we couldn't find her, and this is before cell phones. Something had happened. Well, lo and behold, she had, fell or passed out, broke her arm, and so we all kind of blew it off, Within 3 months later or so, she had some issues, with her body, and then had to go to the doctor for it. So when she went to the doctor, and then they did some surgery on her, found out she had colon cancer. So when I was a freshman at Ohio State, I got to see my mama whenever she was at the James Cancer Center, but she was in and out of there most of the time. And I was the biggest mama's boy too, man. Let's just be honest.
Yep.
She was my hero, and it's nothing against my father. I love
Right.
him dearly, but my sister and him have a very special bond, and I get it. But my mama, man, was my hero, and she instilled every bit of love and value I've ever had as a man, and how I was towards others. And so, right before finals week, when I was 19 in 1994, she died.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah, it is, because and it's so odd because people think, man, it's been so long, but when it's somebody like that out of nowhere that happens, and I was alone, basically alone, dealing with myself, and I wasn't reaching out for anybody. It was tough, man.
Yeah. Well, in those development years too.
Oh, yeah.
Parents pass away when you're 50, 60 years old. You know, like
Yeah.
not when you're 19.
And, and working in what I do in prevention when I'm in these high schools, I'm like, listen, your brain doesn't stop developing until you're 25. There's a lot to be said about that. And like, that was my first real heavy trauma. Like, you know, I got spanked in the butt for being ornery when I was a kid. I get that. But like, this was the one that really was like, flip the light on. As far as turning to substances.
Okay.
It had gotten to the point that I did some really bad things where I worked, lost my job there, and so I was helping a friend out working, and then that's when I started, you know, going to the heavier stuff of the opiates. So it got to the point where I was using roughly 12 perk 20s, basically equivalent a day, $240 roughly a day was my habit, and it was awful to make ends meet and work and do that, run the hustle, and it was very regretful because I lied to everybody, lied to my wife, her parents, my family. I'd take a $20 bill or more from people in my family, and they obviously knew it was gone, but I act like they didn't. I did a lot of very unsavory things.
And how long did that last for? About.
Maybe a year.
Okay.
I was doing that, and I grew tired. But there was also a point that it got to the point at one thing that happened is my wife's family at the time intervened and had an intervention. But I talked my way out of it, man. Just like any addict would, and they were a good salesman. That's what I did. And I'm not proud of it, but I did it.
Right.
Well, my brother-in-law at the time, a few months later, was a police officer, and he kind of, thank God, did this. He had surgery done on his mouth or something happened, I forget. And he had Vicodin and he baited me basically and knew something was up. So I took a few, act like he wouldn't know. Comes to my door that night, knocking. I said, hey dude, I know it was you. So we got two choices, and I was like, oh boy. So yeah, I went to treatment because if not, I was gonna lose everything. And so I did. I went to Talbot.
Okay.
Wonderful place. Did the treatment. Did the after treatment, all that.
And no opiate use. Any other marijuana, alcohol use during this time?
Once I started getting back into it, the opiates were gone. And then I got into alcohol and weed again. That's what I was getting at. So I was sober off of opiates for 17 years, like no more since. Then I got into alcohol and weed because that's what my coworkers did on traveling. I was taking customers out to eat. Everybody was drinking, and then I finally, because I wasn't a huge drinker, I wasn't like well, I started getting into drinking, and I didn't drink beer. I got into whiskey, Jack Daniels to be exact. And you know, we drank in my family. That's what it was, man. And it wasn't like there was alcoholism in my family. My aunt was. other people, but it wasn't. I was like, man, it really wasn't my jam. You know?
Yes.
And I was like, man, I have to pee all the time. I don't want to go to a bar and just get tanked and then drive drunk, blah, blah, blah. But then I got the taste of Jack and Coke, man, and I was like, oh boy. Like, that tasted good. Like, honestly, I can still taste that.
Mm-hmm.
And do I crave it now? No, but, like, you can taste that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of an addict's story, is remembering that. It's like a Pavlov dog thing. So, you know, my kids are growing up and I'm working, and I go to work for the competition in this business I was in, working for this local company. Well, basically I got nailed with no compete clause. So, long story short, I ended up losing my job and my whole career went. I did get severance pay for about 6 months. Well, during that whole 6 months, man, I hit the bottle every day. Heavy, depressed. My wife was working, and she's just, you know, things weren't good. Mm-hmm. But we worked through it.
Okay.
And I drink, and I was drinking heavily. Oh, it was so bad. And I was drinking almost a fifth a day of Jack. I was coaching my kids' ball teams. I had an instance at a basketball game one time, and I was coaching, and I was half tanked and shouted. It was awful. My self-worth was just, I was still self-isolating and doing what I knew, and I wasn't dealing with my mental health. And it got to the point, my wife of almost 20 years told me she wanted a divorce, and then my kids also told me they basically couldn't stand me. And I thought for the longest time we were still cool, like we had a good relationship, and I was like, huh. Okay, so it was bad enough to find out I had a divorce. Come on. I was sober and dealing with a lot of stuff, but then my kids basically tell me to my face, you're nothing but a piece of crap, and we just team mom all the way, we don't want to be with you. I'm still dealing with a lot of that, because that was almost 3 years ago, I guess. I went completely psychotic, basically. I was anything for attention. I was acting out. I remember I put myself in a 3-day mental health hold up at the Dean hospital, because this was so bad. And I said, I'm not going unless you tell me we're not getting a divorce. And she basically said, we'll be fine. Well, obviously, she just wanted me to go get help and still divorce. So I get back after I get out of that 3-day hold, which is it was kind of effective. Well, I thought everything was good, and then she comes home and said she had cheated on me, and I completely lost it. And I was like, so that was one of my failed attempts at suicide. It was a situation that, I mean, to this day I have difficulty with, because that's when the underlying issues I had to start dealing with. Fast forward a couple weeks after that had happened, I was burning personal items of my wife's in front of our house, because I let her have self-use of the house, and I didn't have a lawyer for the divorce she filed. Got served. I wasn't allowed on her property. I step on the property. I'm psychotic. I'm burning stuff of hers, losing my mind. Mm-hmm. I get taken into custody, and I go to jail. Which is the greatest, most humbling thing that ever happened to me as far as all of this. You know, while I was in jail, I've always been a faithful person. But I was left to do nothing but think about me and what I've done, my own devices. And when I was in jail, I prayed every night. I'm like, if there is you here, I need something. Give me something tangible, heavy. I said, I've really been a kind soul for the most part and battled this mental health issue, and it's delved into addiction and my recovery. I'm passionately asking God, like, I need you to help me, God. And I'm praying in my cell, just praying. Well, you know, I felt this almost soul releasing feeling of relief, and God told me everything's going to be all right, and He was going to help me out, and I can't explain it. It felt like a miracle, and within like 2 days, the judge comes in at midnight, after midnight, and signs me and releases me from custody out of nowhere. Charges get dropped. That's when I knew God. I was like, okay, you proved to me. Like, I get it, man. What do I got to do? I am yours from now on. And God's my higher power, man, and saved me because I also tried to die by suicide while I was in jail. So my mental health struggles got to that point where I had to start doing something. And doing it right and actually being honest with myself on whatever I've dealt with. I still struggle every day with my mental health, but my thing is now I know how to cope with it. And I did my thing. My divorce got final. But all the after effects from my actions and not dealing with any of my mental health struggles and depression and anxiety, ADHD, bipolar, and all my mood problems and self-image led me down the road to using something to mask it, which is stereotypical to deal with anything in addiction. They use that for dealing with trauma. You use it to deal with your PTSD. You deal with your depression, anything. But we're not tackling that main problem, which was my problem was my main problem was dealing with my loss of my mom, my self-image, and everything else. And honestly, you know, like I've had to come to terms, and I still get sad a lot, but I've had to come to terms with the fact that I have 2 children that I love more than life itself. One's 18 and blocked me. I don't talk to him, unfortunately, and I would do anything to. I have a younger one that we talk very little, and they're in therapy now. But my 18-year-old's graduating from high school next week, and I'm not invited, not welcome. I'm going, but like that really puts into place how humbling this disease is, and how deadly it is, and how so roots and dig deep strong you've got to be to claw back. And my wife, I met this incredible woman 10 days out of jail who she's the main reason I'm here, and still alive in a lot of ways because she believed in me. I can't thank God enough for. That's the other miracle I had too, that God put her in my life. And like, I was so afraid of relationships. I was going through a divorce. And, you know, she'd fight to the death for me. She's my best friend. She's battled with a different type of addiction and a lot of things in her life. But she and I have an alliance, and it's not a codependency, and it's so healthy what we have. Driven by faith and love. But we got married last December on Christmas Eve, and I definitely know she's my soulmate. And if it wasn't for the people I'd surrounded myself with and made it my life's mission now to do things like this and to show people like, yep, there's always hope. And I want to be very clear that I was not always a good person. And for that, I am very deeply sorry for. I'm so remorseful for, and I don't ask for forgiveness because I can't expect that in return. But just to people know how sorry I truly am. That addiction can cause so much chaos and problems. But I, for one, can tell you that, like, I am proof positive that if you just stick at it, man, you gotta want it. But if you claw and stick at it, you'll be able to do it.
That's beautiful.
Thank
and you
you.
hit on so many different topics, and it's wonderful that that's what works for you. Because
Yeah.
like you said, everybody is different. And the what you were talking about that came to my mind is that you were an advocate for yourself. So
Yeah.
being able to go to the doctor when you start feeling a different way, you know, our chemistry does change. So being able to adjust
sure.
medication and whatnot, that's your responsibility now because
Yeah.
you've been given the time and started to get that peace and freedom in recovery.
Yeah, for sure.
Which brings me to my next question. What words of hope could you share with someone who is trying to get sober?
Like my mama said, and I have it tattooed on me, this too shall pass. And trust the process. Sometimes it takes longer. And you're going to relapse possibly, or you're going to have issues. But that doesn't make you bad. I love you. I love you all. I do, man. I got nothing but love. If you trip up, it's okay. Say you're clean, you trip up after 17 years, that's fine. I love you. You're worth. Get back on your feet. We all make those mistakes. Don't lose belief. Everything's a process and you have to trust it. But this too shall pass.
Well, we really appreciate you coming
Yeah.
out here today. Your
For
story
sure.
is going to help so many people. You touched on so many really, really important points. You've showed that there is hope and that there is a way out of active addiction and into
Yeah.
the freedom of recovery.